Hello everyone, can you hear me? Dear Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends both physically here and those joining us via Zoom, welcome to the Nordic Green Conference of 2021. I am Erik Bukker Johannessen from Innovation Norway, and I will be your MC for this event. I first want to remind you all of the safe management measures that are in place. First of all, keep your mask on at all times. We will only serve bottled water before dinner. After consuming, please put your mask on immediately. Always keep a distance of 1 meter. Also, you're only allowed to mingle with a person at your assigned table, limited to 2 packs. Intermingling is not allowed in this event. This also applies to dinner served later. In this event, our MC, moderators, and speakers will unmask during the panel discussion, strictly adhering to the SMM rules where less than 10 speakers can unmask, seated 1 meter apart and 2 meters from the audience. I remind all the speakers to put on their mask once the discussion ends. Lastly, everyone, please keep your electronic devices in silent mode. As some of you may know, the Nordic Green is a recurring event organized as part of the Singapore International Energy Week, known as SIEW. It is a joint undertaking by the Nordic Embassies and Trade Promotion Offices here in Singapore, together with the Nordic Innovation House Singapore and supported by Nordic Innovation. The Nordic Embassies and Trade Promotion Offices have been and will continue to be supporting partners to the Energy Market Authority and Sustainable Energy Association in Singapore when it comes to the organizing of the Singapore International Energy Week. The theme of this year's event is the Nordic Green Talks, reducing our carbon footprint. We bring together the Nordic Ambassadors to Singapore and leading Nordic companies in the Asia-Pacific region to discuss and learn more about their commitment to a clear transition pathway for global carbon reduction by 2030. Both the Nordics and Singapore have set clear goals for reducing their carbon footprint by 2030, which we'll hear more about later. I now pass on the word to Her Excellency Sigridur Astis Snevar, the Icelandic Ambassador to Singapore, to give the opening remarks for this year's Nordic Green, before we dive into discussion with the other Nordic Ambassadors to Singapore.
Excellencies and colleagues, dear guests. As the Dean of the Nordic Ambassadors Group in Singapore, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the newest edition of our Nordic Green Initiative, our annual seminar on Nordic green energy and sustainability solutions. As in previous years, the event is held in conjunction with Singapore International Energy Week, one of Asia's most recognized platforms for sharing experiences, best practices, and know-how in the energy sector. The event is organized by the 5 Nordic countries, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Iceland, and Sweden, under the umbrella of our wonderful partners at Nordic Innovation House Singapore. The Nordics have formulated an ambitious vision for their joint future cooperation, that by 2030 the Nordic region will be the most integrated and sustainable in the world. Ambitious and in line with the challenges we face, the climate change, the pollution, threats to biodiversity, it calls for our urgent attention. The Nordics wish to lead by example, and with partners like Singapore, an important partner for the Nordic countries when dealing with issues of global importance. And Singapore also has set itself a clear and ambitious plan for a more sustainable and green future, which corresponds very well with our own priorities. We know that we need changes in lifestyles and attitudes, production methods and patterns of consumption. We need to find a balance between the harnessing of nature on the one hand and its protection on the other to achieve sustainable development for the future. The solutions do exist. They're right in front of us. Sustainable energy production and climate neutrality, green transport, investments, the bioeconomy and the circular economy. There's no single solution, but many, and in many areas all at once. The green economy will be driven by innovation. With COP26 just around the corner, we've all felt the call for more urgency. The Nordics are pooling their strengths in the interest of climate and society. Agenda 2030 and the Paris Agreement show the way that we need to work even more ambitiously and faster, and by generating and sharing knowledge with global partners like Singapore. By working together from different parts of the globe, we complement each other to our mutual benefit. I wish you all a productive seminar and would now like to invite my fellow Nordic ambassadors to Singapore to take the stage for the opening session. I thank you.
Thank you to Your Excellency Sigridur Asti Snevar for those brilliant opening remarks. I will now be introducing the moderator and the Nordic ambassadors to Singapore. Our moderator for this panel discussion is Anette Østegård Jørgensen, Head of Public Diplomacy and Partnerships at the Embassy of Denmark in Singapore. The Nordic ambassadors present here today are His Excellency Antti Vanska, Ambassador of Finland to Singapore from the Embassy of Finland. His Excellency Eivind Homme, Ambassador of Norway to Singapore from the Royal Norwegian Embassy. Her Excellency Sandra Jensen Landi, Ambassador of Denmark to Singapore and Brunei from the Embassy of Denmark. And lastly, Harold Fries, Chargé d'Affaires to Singapore from the Embassy of Sweden. I now hand over the floor to Anette.
Thank you very much, Eric. Ambassadors, please join me on the stage, and I'll help you get seated. So Antti, you are here. Ivan, you are there. Sandra, that's your chair. And Harold, you are at the end. And we are allowed to remove our masks while we're in the panel. So that's good. All right, I think we're off to a great start. We all managed to climb onto these chairs. Being short and afraid of heights, I always have little issues with bar stools, but I think we're all good to go. You've got water and you've got microphones as well. I am very excited about being here on stage today with not only one, but 4 Nordic ambassadors. This is very special. It doesn't happen every day, especially not in these COVID times. So I've been very excited about today. The Nordic countries, as mentioned by the Icelandic ambassador, all share ambitious goals for lowering our carbon footprint. And today we're going to hear about some of the strategies in the Nordic countries on how to reach these goals. I'm also hoping to hear a little bit about the learnings from these strategies in the Nordic countries in the context of Singapore and the Asia Pacific region. So I think we will just dive in, and I'm going to start close to home. I know that Denmark has very ambitious goals as well. Maybe it's not a competition, but maybe some of the world's most ambitious goals for lowering our carbon footprint. Sandra, I think a lot of people in the audience are probably wondering, how are we going to reach these goals in Denmark? Is it even possible? How are we going to do that?
Yes, thank you very much. And yeah, just to underline that, we do have the goal of neutrality by 2050. We want to be independent from any sort of fossil fuels, by then 100% green electricity. We have 50% renewable electricity today already. And in 2030 already, we'll be aiming at reaching the 70% target. So it is very ambitious. And the government has recently made a green action plan for how to get there. And the main focus are that we are simply going to, maybe from Singaporean ideas, expand our land by building new islands. And they are going to be energy islands. Well, one of the islands, we're going to make 2 energy islands. One of them is on an existing island, and the other one, we're going to make a new one. And we're going to do very intensive offshore wind energy there. And we're going to be able to generate more electricity than we need ourselves, more energy than we need. So we want to export it also. The aim, we'll start off building 4 to 5 gigawatt, which is enough to power 7 million electric vehicles or 4 to 5 million households. So it is much more than we need in a country of 5.5 million people. So we will build a grid system with Germany and Holland as well to begin with. I maybe want to say that it's already underway. A part of that is also a power to X solution where we are looking at not just how to power the vehicles and the household, but also the moving the vessels and the airplanes. And so a part of this very ambitious energy project is to power, turn green energy into hydrogen that we can then transfer to airplanes and shipping vessels and so on. There are already 10 projects that have started in Denmark on this. There's a lot of the technology we don't have yet. So there are lots of the pieces of the puzzles that are not in place, but it is a journey we have begun and we have invested heavily in it, and we are looking for even more investments. It's the largest infrastructure project that Denmark has ever made. It's nearly 60 billion Sing dollars. So it is really a massive investment, but it shows how committed the government is to reaching the targets and really getting there by 2050.
Thank you, Sandra. So it sounds like we will actually get there in Denmark. It is doable with these massive investments.
It's the plan.
So speaking of massive investments, I think I'm going to turn to Norway and you, Ivan. Now we heard about green energy, transitioning to green energy as a way to lowering our carbon footprint. You have actually been working quite some time now with another angle, which is about carbon capture in storage. So what I would like to know is, how far along are you in these projects? Are you seeing a success? And could this really be the big ticket for the rest of us that are looking at how to lower our emission?
I think working. Is it working? Yeah. I think that's what we want to aim. But let me tell you that we have already 25 years of experience of storing safely CO2 under our seabed in the North Sea. And last year we started an exciting new project called Longship, after our Viking ships. And this is the largest climate project by our industry ever. So this is to cut emissions and also develop new technology. Because there are different technologies for capturing CO2, and several of them are now being tested at what's called the Technology Center at Mongstad, just in the western part of Norway. And I'm also very happy to see just a few weeks ago our energy company Equinor said that it's ready to chip in and also to come in with more financing. So this project can be even more ambitious than the government has thought. So let me tell you a little bit about the elements in this. Part of that is what's called the Northern Lights CCS project, and that is based on the collection of CO2 from a number of industrial sources in Norway, but also from other parts of Europe. So this CO2 will be then transported by ship to a collection terminal on the west coast of Norway for permanent storage. And you think there must be a lot of CO2 to store? Well, but it's also estimated that the storage capacity is more than 80 billion tons of CO2 on the Norwegian continental shelf. So there's plenty of space there if you manage to do this. But this is, of course, also being tested out other places in the world, and I think it's very important that we work together to find new technologies that really work. But again, it's been safely captured and storage under the North Sea, under the seabed now for over 25 years.
Okay, thank you for that. I didn't know that you've actually been storing for 25 years, so that's a long time. So I trust that it actually works, and I think that's good news for the rest of the world, that there is some experience there that then can be exported and used other places. So lowering our carbon emission is not just about green energy and capturing carbon. It is also about how we use our resources and wisely, and how we also reuse our resources, which is kind of a different path when we're talking about lowering our carbon footprint. I know that's also something that our experts in the Fireside chat are going to touch upon a little later. But for now, I know, Antti, that this is a big focus area in Finland. Could you point to some sectors or areas in Finland where you really see the potential in looking down the path of using our materials, resources wisely and reusing them?
Well, yes, thank you. It's a very good question, and thank you for organizing this event to all the organizers, and hello to all the participants. It would be so tempting to mingle and talk to you all, but well, will not happen now. Later on, but yes, I would like to start with the big picture, just very briefly. The COP22 just around the corner. So of course, the big picture is quite clear in the way that the humanity has made a mess, and now we should somehow try to sort it out. The International Climate Panel, the IPCC, has said that we should cut down our carbon emissions by 45% by 2030. Well, this is not happening if you judge by the national commitments made by countries so far. The emissions are just growing. So the situation is really alarming. But nevertheless, it's no use in despairing and giving up. We just have to be more innovative and come up with new solutions. And that, of course, takes all of us, the governments, the companies, individuals. Finland takes climate change very, very seriously. We have committed, we're determined to become climate neutral by 2035, which is a very ambitious goal. And I think we'll make it. Of course, Finland's emissions in global scale are minuscule. It's 0.13% of the world emissions, and it's the same with all the Nordic countries. Your emissions might be even smaller, but nevertheless, we need to do more, and we need to be innovative. So in Finland, we have this, or it's elsewhere as well, but in Finland, we are very fond of this concept of circular economy. It's sort of a new way of thinking, and basically it's about how to utilize, how to use the resources we have in a smarter way that we have been doing so far. And fortunately, we have many good companies which are putting this circular economy way of thinking into practice. But Finland as a country has also committed that by 2035 we will use the primary resources no more than what we did in 2015. It's also a good ambitious goal. But just want to mention a couple of Finnish companies which are very good in this front. Well, I'll start with the Neste. Neste is a company probably well known to many Singaporeans. It has a big factory in Tuas, and there's an enlargement of that production facilities going on right now. It's a huge investment, more than 2 billion Singapore dollars. So when I was growing up, I knew Neste as an oil refinery, sort of traditional oil refinery, also having an extensive network of gas stations selling, gasoline to drivers. But today, Neste is a lot more than that. What they are doing is that they are pioneering in biofuels. So what they do is they gather waste, they gather the residues from food industry, old used cooking oil, things like that, and turn that into a premium class fuel. So it's something really wonderful. The carbon footprint being much lower than in traditional fuels, and the sort of performance level of those fuels at least as good. So that's from the sort of from that line of business. Then we have from other companies from different industries. One very promising, not a very old company, about 5 years old, is Infinited Fiber Company, which works in the textile industry. And in the textile industry, in the clothing business, it's been researched that usually one textile is used just once or owned by just one owner. So 85% globally of all textiles are being used just once or owned just by one owner. So if I don't want to use my jeans anymore, I throw them away. Well, that's been the traditional way of doing earlier. But what this company does, it gathers used textiles. It gathers also like old cardboard boxes. It takes in some residues from agriculture, like wheat straws, and turns that into a totally new fabric. And also here, it's amazing, but the qualities of this new fabric are at least as good as from traditional fabrics. But the carbon footprint is about 80% less than when you have cotton-based or oil-based fabrics. So it's something really promising. Then the third example from, again, a different line of industry. That's called a company, Betolar. It's in the construction industry. Construction, of course, is something that we will have to have in the future as well. We need new buildings. We need to build places to live in and so on. And that's usually very energy intensive and also creating a lot of emissions. But what Betolar has done is they have reinvented concrete. So they gather side streams from different industries and have created concrete which is cement free and also something like 80% less carbon producing and having the same good qualities. So these, I think, are very sort of promising good signs in this overall situation, which is quite depressing. But you have to look into these good signs as well. And I'm happy to say that we in Singapore we have many other Finnish companies like Wärtsilä or Kone, Nokia also, which are all having this sort of environmentally conscious way of thinking in their operations. But it takes a lot of effort from all levels, from governments, companies, and from the individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Antti, for these very concrete examples. It also makes me very optimistic how much can actually be done by reusing materials wisely. Especially, it's very promising in the cement production, because that is an industry that is polluting a lot at the moment, because it's difficult to actually make concrete without using fossil fuels. So for me, I would say I just get very optimistic about hearing these examples. I'm going to stay in this track of how we can use our resources wisely, And I would like to turn to Sweden and actually ask you sort of the same question, Harold. Which sectors or are there areas in Sweden where you see a lot of potential in looking at how we use and reuse our resources wisely?
Okay, is it on? Yes, good. Thank you, Annette. I'll be happy to comment on your question, but I'll turn it around a little bit and say that I will rather speak about an area in which the Sweden and the Nordic countries have shown very much progress, and this area can then maybe inspire other countries. And this area is waste management. I mean, solid waste management is a major challenge in all around the world. And in a small and densely populated country like Singapore, waste management becomes a critical task to deal with. And I think it's fair to say that the Nordic countries are world leaders when it comes to waste management. We've been at it for very long, several decades, and over the time we have developed the know-how and technology to make our waste management efficient. In my country, Sweden, in the 70s, practically all waste ended up in landfill with serious environmental consequences. Now today, 99.5% of the Swedish household waste is either recycled or turned into energy by using modern and environmentally friendly incineration plants. So only 0.5% of household waste ends up in landfill, and that small share is continuously decreasing. So soon we won't have any need for landfills in my country anymore. Our capacity to recycle and turn waste into energy has now become so efficient that Sweden actually imports waste from other countries, and we make money out of it. To explain the success of waste management in my country, and I think in the other Nordic countries, one should look at factors like technological advances, necessary infrastructure investments, government regulations, use taxes as incentives, and also information campaigns. But it all starts with the individual household member separating his or her waste. Over the time, in my country, the mind shift has shifted so that it's become natural for almost all of us to put our glass, plastics, metal, organic material, paper into separate waste bins. And this is the basis for all waste management. Now, let me end by briefly mentioning two concrete, innovative solutions to different waste management challenges. And both of these solutions are readily available here now in Singapore, and they are offered by Swedish companies. And the first one is the reverse vending machine. This machine is collecting used beverage containers, and it's called reverse vending machine because it's sort of the opposite of the traditional vending machine in which you put money and you get the product out of it. In this case, you put the product in there. So this would be used beverage containers, glass, plastic, or cans, and you get money out of the machine. So this is a great incentive for individuals to support recycling. And these machines are very common in the Nordic countries. They are typically found inside or just outside the grocery stores. And the result now is that at least 90% of all used beverage containers are collected and recycled and used again as new bottles or new cans. And Singapore is now doing this as a pilot in partnership with the Swedish supplier RVM System. So I hope that we will soon see more of these machines here in Singapore, and I think it has a fantastic potential. The second concrete solution that I would like to mention is the automated waste disposal system. And this has many benefits, but one is that it reduces the amount of driving of garbage trucks. Now, if you live in an apartment building, traditionally you take your garbage bag down and throw it in a bin in the basement or just outside the building, and then a truck drives from building to building in the whole residential area, picks up the garbage and transports the garbage to a waste disposal center. And this creates, all this driving, of course, is bad for the environment, and it adds to climate change. Now, with this automated waste disposal system, the tenant in the apartment building brings the garbage bag, puts it into a chute, which is connected to an underground network of pipes. And in these pipes, the garbage bag is transported by air pressure to a station in the neighborhood or just outside the neighborhood. And then the garbage truck can come and pick up from that station and bring it to the waste disposal center far away. So you eliminate garbage trucks driving around back and forth inside the residential area, and the result is that up to 90% of the greenhouse gas emission can be reduced by using one of these systems. And these systems are now being installed in Singapore, and I see also here a great potential. And we have a supplier, Swedish supplier called NVAC, and there's a representative here also from NVAC. So, well, Annette, these are two concrete examples where we have good experiences from the Nordic countries and where I see that there's a great potential here in Singapore.
Thank you for that. I'm very passionate myself about sorting my garbage, and having lived in several different parts of the world, I also feel that's the awareness of waste management is very different. So maybe just a quick follow-up question for you, Harold. You described how people in Sweden are sorting all their garbage. Why is that? Is that because you have Greta Thunberg who created a movement? How did you create this awareness about sorting?
I mean, it definitely has happened long before Greta Thunberg, that's for sure. Well, I've been thinking of it myself, and I think there are many reasons. Well, one reason is I mentioned it, information campaigns. So over the years, people in my country have become basically more and more aware of the necessity of doing something concrete yourself to support a better future. But it needs to be helped, and so the infrastructure needs to be developed. So for instance, more and more we have these collection waste or garbage collection stations in our neighborhoods. So it has become so easy for us to just take our bins where we have the glass, plastic, metal, and so on, put it in the car and drive 5 minutes to these stations, and we just throw it in there. And I mean, I know myself, to me it feels like a sort of a cleansing ceremony to get rid of my waste, and I know that it's properly in different bins, and it will be used in a proper way. But there are also financial incentives. So by doing all this separation and you bring it to these stations, you have very, very little garbage to put in your garbage bin next to your house. And before we threw everything in there, but now it turns out to be very little. So the company that collects these the garbage from our own private bins, they have now reduced the price because it's not so much to pick up. So it's become much cheaper for us. So there is a little financial reward for doing all this separation. So I think that's what I can think of right now.
Thank you for that. I especially like the part about how sorting garbage can become a new form of meditation almost. So that could become a great bestseller book, I think. Now we've heard about these different approaches and strategies in the Nordics for reaching the carbon emission goals. Like the Nordics, there are also many plans in Singapore with equally ambitious goals. There's the Singapore Green Plan with the whole of nation movement kind of holistic approach to making a greener city, green economy, sustainable solutions, and the resilient future. And there's also the future of Singapore energy based on the four switches. So now I would like to jump into how these great examples from the Nordics can kind of relate to the strategies here in Singapore. And I would like to start with the future of energy and jump back to you, Sandra, and the energy islands. When you see the Danish approach and these energy islands, are there any learnings that you feel could be especially relevant for the future of energy in Singapore?
Well, I do think so. I think as many of people in this room are very aware that it's a very difficult situation for Singapore with I mean, my country is very windy, so it's obvious we're going to try to harvest the wind for some energy, but that's a much more difficult situation here. The solar power potential is limited. The Singaporean government is definitely doing what they can in that regard. But I think one lesson to learn is to look at how we have built our structure. Because, as I mentioned before, the energy islands will be a grid with some of our neighbors because we will be producing surplus green energy. But already today we are connected to a grid to our dear neighbors, on a grid to our dear neighbors, so that when we don't have enough wind energy today, we exploit hydropower energy from Norway, for example. And I think that is a lesson that I would hope. I mean, we have a good relationship, but we have fought many times in history. So we have also built good trust with our neighbors, and not least through these energy agreements. And I think that's something that Singapore could also do and be a big motor in a regional grid solution, one way or another here, that could draw on some of the potentials of the neighboring countries as well. Yeah. And we are looking a lot at wind, but we're not only looking at wind. We're also looking at solar. We're also looking at other sources, and I think that's the same for most countries. It's very hard to rely on just one source. So to do that patchwork, every country that fits with what are your natural resources and what are the resources in the area is something that you can build on. And we would definitely like to share our experiences with our energy authorities that they have of building the necessary framework and practical agreements and MOUs and whatever else you need. With this region, there's a lot of very strong companies in that area here.
Thank you, Sandra. If we jump to the Singapore Green Plan, which has more items than just energy, I would like to ask maybe Ivan or Ensi, are there other learnings from a Nordic context that could be relevant when you're looking at the Singapore Green Plan and how to make that a success. Yes,
Absolutely.
Eileen?
First of all, I like to go back to what I talked about, CCS, because we have also floated this idea.
I think you have to.
Yeah, we also floated that idea here, and some professors at the NUS have published a paper and proposed maybe a Southern Light CCS project. That to say, you can have a large capture of storage from the factories and the refineries at Jurong Island, which represent more than 50% of Singapore's emissions, and then to have ships or a pipeline to a permanent storage this in Malaysia or Indonesia under the seabed. So this is now something that's being assessed by the National Climate Change Secretariat and other government agency here in Singapore. I think that's very exciting. That's something that Norway will be very happy to assist and support, and we could work together if that should happen to embark on a Southern Lights CCS project. Then I also like to mention something else. It's called green shipping, decarbonization of the
I have heard a little bit
transport
about
sector.
it, yes.
Yes, but this is Singapore, and we like to talk about it. and we have a very good program there, and I like to give you some examples of what we have managed to do in a very short time, talking about the ferry sector in Norway. So in 2015, we had the first full electric ferry called MV Ampere across the fjords of Norway. And next year, we will have 80 electrical ferries in Norway. That says something about this trend. And it's not only, it's not only ferries, but also all fishing vessels for the gas and oil sector, and also now private leisure boats are going electric. So it's really a trend here, and it gives great opportunities. So next year, we will also have the world's first hydrogen-fueled ferry, the MF Hydra, will start up in Norway. And here, again, good example of how we work together, because the storage and fuel cell system has been done by a Singaporean company owned by Singapore Corp Marine. So this is an area where we are working very closely with Singapore, because we have had cooperation with them, the maritime sector here for decades. So that also enjoys joint funding schemes and agreement with key stakeholders, in particular, the Maritime and Port Authority, but also Singapore Maritime Institute. And I know you all were very excited that MPA then launched this Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization in Singapore in August this year with funds from MPA. There's 6 founding partners of that, and 2 of them are Norwegian. It's the BMW Group and the Norske Veritas, NVD. So here, you all, when you go down to the harbor, you see there's about 1,600 harbor vessels there. And here we can be of support with regard to hull design, battery system, and effective infrastructure for charging them. So that's, I'm really optimistic that very often what we do can complement each other, and there are sectors the different countries have stronger in some sectors than others, but together we have a lot to offer, and ambitions are as high here as there are at home. So I'm very happy to be part of the Nordic family here, and there's a lot of things we can do together with Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you for those encouraging words as well. You're right. There are a lot of more things we could discuss today. We heard about these different approaches in the Nordic countries. That's just a sneak peek of what's actually happening. And I think we could continue all day by talking about what are some of the learnings from the Nordic countries, also some of the difficulties which we didn't touch upon today, because there are also difficulties with these different strategies and projects. So I'm looking at the time, but I do have one final question that I really want to ask, because lowering our carbon footprint is not only about what government does with big infrastructure projects. It's also about what you and me do. So I'm just curious, what are you doing at your embassies to lower your carbon footprint? Harald, you mentioned that you're looking into getting an electric car, but are there other great examples here? Antti?
Thank you. One concrete thing we have done, of course, in addition to recycling and all of that, traditional things and a hybrid car, but we started already 2019. We started having meatless Mondays. So production of especially red meat is also something that is not good for the climate. So we decided that at least once a week, we, the embassy team, go together, have our lunch, a vegetarian lunch somewhere. And that's, of course, sort of a team building as well, but it's really fun, and we have kept doing that, and sometimes not only on Mondays, but other than that. And actually, I'm a traditional sausage eater, so I've learned a lot new things during these meatless Mondays. Thank you.
Thank you for that very excellent example. Before we finish this panel, does anybody else want to share something they're doing? Ivan, you look like you want to share.
I'm not going to brag about something we're doing at the embassy, but I would just say that we had the Singapore-Norway Innovation Conference last week, and it was really dedicated, to sustainability, circular economy, decarbonization. I think that's some of the best thing we could do to bring people together and share ideas. Of course, this is also something we have to think about ourselves personally, because it's going to be a change of lifestyle and we have to sacrifice something. It will. But and we should start with ourselves, but at least here as Embassy, we have a fantastic opportunity to bring good minds together and bring in from both sides.
Thank you so much. Are you picking up your microphone?
Yes,
Sorry.
I just
Go
want
ahead.
to add, in addition to changing our current diesel car to a Volvo electric next year, we will explore to put solar panels on the ambassador's residence here in Singapore, and we've done it in our foreign service in some other places. So I think it's a possibility.
Thank you. Sandra, do you want to share what we're doing?
I should do also in honor. We actually have a green team in-house at the embassy to try to see what can we do to collectively and individually. And we have cut down massively on our plastic consumption, for example, by simply introducing reusable containers that people can bring along when we go out for lunch, to pick up lunch. And also changed a lot of our other materials that we use in the embassy. And then we had, and this is a good way of considering the company here, we celebrated our joint National Day celebration in spring by doing a run for sustainability, where we raised, I can't remember, but what was it, 60,000, 70,000 Sing dollars for sustainability projects and the coral reef protection in the region. And I have to say, a lot of us also managed to promote our own, I would say, sustainability by running a lot more kilometers that week than we normally do. So it was also health-wise a very good experience.
Thank you for sharing all these great examples of little things we can do in everyday life. That's all we had time for today for this session. Thank you to all of our Nordic ambassadors for contributing. As I said, this was really a sneak peek in what's actually going on this agenda in the Nordic countries. We will hear more in the next session about how Nordic companies are working in this region on becoming more sustainable, but also providing sustainable solutions to others. But could you all please help me give a very warm thank you to our ambassadors before we venture on to the next part of the session today. Thank you.
Thank you to the Nordic Ambassadors and our moderator for that interesting panel discussion. So next on the program, we have the Nordic Fireside Talks, reducing our carbon footprints. Before we move on to our panel of speakers from Nordic companies, I just want to remind you that you can direct your questions to the speakers directly using Slido. So as you can see on the screen, you can either scan the QR code to launch Slido, or you can just search on your web browser for Slido and then enter the event code Nordic Green 2021. And I have the pleasure to welcome to the stage our moderator for the Fireside Chat, Corrado Forcelati, Director at Pi Consulting. The floor is yours, Corrado.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon to everyone. Before introducing my speakers for today, I will just give a few reflections about what I heard. I like the energy about looking at reducing the carbon footprint, not as a burden, but I actually felt a lot of energy. I felt really, from Ivan, from Sandra, from Antti, from Harald, I felt like, oh, this is actually is leading into new business models. And I think it's an important message when looking at reducing footprint, that the collaborative effort is not only to understand what are the risks, but definitely is to look into the opportunities. I would like to start welcoming my fellow speakers and panelists, starting with Stephen Bartolomeus, heading the public affairs for Neste Finland. Stephen, please. You can sit there. Next, if I can ask Corina Schulter, corporate communication and acting sustainability lead for IKEA Southeast Asia. Vijay Krishna, Restart Energy, welcome to the stage. Priyanka Christensen, Hempel, Regional Sustainability Manager, Southeast Asia, please. Enrique Koitsueta, welcome to the stage, please, representing Iceland and the company Meniga. Yeah, mask-free. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. Yeah, mask-free. Yeah. I think the way we are going to have this fireside chat is to frame it a bit. So I think what we heard about the previous session is this really collaborative effort that is required. I think when I'm thinking about the Nordic region, I'm thinking about collaboration, but I'm also thinking about this cross-border solution-oriented way of solving problems. I think the way we were listening into the previous session is you get a sense that when you're looking at reducing footprint, one site doesn't fit them all, so you need really to bring the puzzle together. Nordic region has also this culture of collaboration that is translating into commercial relationships. And I wonder whether all the work that is being doing around decarbonizing can actually result into commercial, legal, regulatory agreements, maybe in line with the one that we start seeing Singapore is drafting with Australia. So where you have green agreements that are also regulating relationship pertaining to import of electricity. Yeah. So it will be truly interesting to hear about my panelists on not so much the why we need to decarbonize. I think we are over it. This is about how and what is actually happening on the ground. I was listening into the energy island. I was listening into the CCS, the circular economy, the waste management. And I think all this on a high level makes a lot of sense. But I think we get a chance to get a little bit a better perspective from you today on how is that actually, how is that executed. So I would like to structure the Fireside into 4 streams, looking at decarbonization from basically effective or efficient operations. And I think, Stephen, you can give a little bit of flavor what Neste is doing in that sense. On the value chain with Priyanka, I think you can add to that conversation. Moving into solutions, technology, Vijay, I think you have something to share there. Waste, Corina and IKEA, I'm sure that there is a lot of interesting things happening at your end. And finally, Enrique, on engaging consumers from the business side, but also, more broadly supply chain with some of the solutions that you have. So without any further ado, Stephen, can I ask you to start introducing what you do, and then we will have a conversation.
Thank you very much, Corrado. And I have to say, I'm quite optimistic after listening to the last session from the Nordic Ambassadors, because quite frankly, just watching the news the last few days has been quite scary. I go to the gym in the mornings, and the only channel that's available at my condo is Channel News Asia. So whether you like it or not, you have to watch Channel News Asia. And I mean, the news, unfortunately, is scary in general, and it's not just because of COVID. But the last couple of days, I've been watching the news, and what's really scary is the news around climate change. And I won't even go into the IPCC report because that was a few weeks away. But on Tuesday, we had the World Meteorological Organization telling us that despite COVID-19 and perhaps a slowdown in industrial output, travel, etc., carbon dioxide emissions in 2020 were 149% higher than pre-industrial levels. Methane emissions were 262% higher than pre-industrial levels. And nitrous oxide, 123% higher compared to the point when human activity started having an impact on the environment. So that's quite scary. Then I went to the gym on Wednesday, and the UN Environment Programme came out with the emissions gap report, which essentially said that national plans to cut carbon fall far short of what's needed to avert a climate crisis. And the news headline that really struck home to me was that the report said that the world is on course to warm up by 2.7 degrees Celsius in this century. So that's in the next 79 years, with catastrophic consequences. So taking all that into consideration, I didn't go to the gym today. But in all seriousness, we are headed, as the UNEP report says, for a climate catastrophe. And some of us, hopefully, might still be alive to witness parts of this catastrophe. But the reality is the people who are really going to be impacted by this catastrophe are our children and our grandchildren. And that brings me to Neste's purpose, which is to create a healthier planet for our children. And this purpose is what really pushes us, drives us, and obliges us to stretch our vision into fighting the climate change crisis, and also widening our views on the role we can play in tackling biodiversity loss, but also inequality. All of these things we feel are interlinked together. It is our purpose that drives us to innovate and to reduce our carbon footprint, and also provide circular solutions that help our customers reduce their carbon handprint. So at Neste, just yesterday, we have made a commitment towards a carbon neutral value chain by 2040. And what does this mean for our approach to doing business? It means we expand our climate change commitments to cover the entire value chain. So in our production, our own carbon footprint, we aim to reduce emissions in our own production, so that's scope 1 and 2, by 50% by 2030, and reach carbon neutrality by 2035. Then, considering our value chain carbon footprint, we have a goal to reduce the carbon emissions intensity of all our sold products and work with our suppliers and partners to reduce emissions across scope 3. And then finally, looking at our carbon handprint. So our carbon handprint is one organization's efforts to reduce the carbon footprint of another organization. And I think this is a very important aspect because, it's great to sit here and talk about what Neste is doing to reduce its carbon footprint. But what are we doing to support our customers? What are we doing to support governments and other jurisdictions to reduce their own carbon footprint? And that's a very important aspect. Now, we have made a commitment there to help our customers reduce their carbon emissions by at least 20 million tons of CO2 equivalent by 2030. And we've already well on that target because last year we helped our customers reduce their carbon emissions by 10 million tons. So I think what's important here, as I said earlier, is looking at not only your own carbon footprint, but what are you doing to help your customers? And that's why it's enlightening to listen to the ambassadors and the work they're doing in Singapore to support Singapore in reducing its carbon footprint as well.
Stephen, thank you so much. I'm back on the gym after this session. In terms of engaging customer, and I'm jumping a little bit, Enrique, since you have a good experience in engaging consumer businesses, can you share your perspective based on the work that you're doing with Beniga?
Yes, we work with banks, financial institutions, but I was actually listening very attentively to what he was saying, Steve was saying, because that is exactly what we're doing. We're helping banks to help the customers to be aware of their carbon footprint. And that's kind of the first step that we need to take as citizens, right? We need to learn what are we doing well and what are we not doing well. And imagine how powerful it is if my bank can tell me, what I'm doing well and what I'm not. It's very useful information because I may change my spending habits just by looking at the carbon footprint. So we use technology to engage with those customers, banking customers, and to create very meaningful conversations around carbon.
Yeah, thank you. And when we are thinking about engaging consumers, Corina, IKEA, and all the food waste program that you are running and the circular hub that are emerging, can you share a little bit more about it?
Yeah, we consider our customers a really important part of the journey, for sure. In Thailand, we recently launched our first circular hub. Some of the stores in Europe already have this solution. But at IKEA, we've always been selling secondhand furniture, actually, through our as-is shops. We never throw anything away. Slightly damaged goods or things that people return are ending up in our secondhand shop there at discount prices for people. But we're rebranding that now to become a circular hub everywhere. But in Thailand, we're taking furniture back for the first time. So prolonging the life of our furniture is a big part of our carbon footprint. So we are taking furniture back. If we can't sell it in the secondhand shop, we're giving it to a good cause that's lined up. If it's so badly damaged that it's not no use to us or not good for sale, it goes to a good cause. And we're also hosting workshops there on how to repair and refurbish your IKEA furniture. We offer spare parts, and we've done these things, but we're amplifying it, making it much louder and really engaging the customer and talking to them about circularity. In Southeast Asia, that word is new. When we first talked about the circular hub, there were coworkers saying, the what? They didn't know what that was or what that meant. So we're trying to introduce the idea of circularity and just raising that in the minds of people. What does it mean when you prolong the life of your products and you find a way to reuse, refurbish, give it away? Yeah.
Yeah, and in circularity, Vijay, I know that the work that you are doing is very much not only looking at the solution and the technology, but also keeping in mind how important that finite resource that we have and even how to reduce it. And I think Ivan, he made a good, he appears to be a good sponsor for CCS. And that's one of the areas that you're working with.
Definitely. I think that was very well said by the ambassador. CCS has been around for a long time. This has not been fully deployed or adopted in most countries. So Southeast Asia, if we look ahead to the year 2025, 2030, we're actually seeing that Southeast Asia is going to have 6% of the new CCS projects globally, which is quite interesting. And a lot of that's going to happen in Southeast Asia, offshore Indonesia, and I think a lot of the depleted gas fields, etc., that are out there could be repurposed as caverns and so on to store CO2. And I think that's going to be quite interesting, a bit of a game changer. We're also seeing a lot of our clients in Southeast Asia looking towards, especially the steel players, the people in the cement industries, how are they going to harness hydrogen, which is, some would say there's a lot of hype around it. I think the hype has come and gone. The technology is here now and is improving, kind of like Moore's law. And if you look at hydrogen, whether it's green, blue, gray, etc., the cost of hydrogen is decreasing every minute because of technology. Like what Enrique said, technology has enabled us. Look at us in this pandemic, where all of the things that we're doing is because technology has enabled us to do all the things that we're doing right now. This is a hybrid event. We would not have been able to do this 20 years ago. So if we think with that sort of a mindset and say, okay, how is technology going to enable this? I'm very optimistic that in Southeast Asia, we're going to be able to deliver on the decarbonization. As much as the governments have been sort of reticent, some governments more so than others, policymakers are unsure because there's just so much noise. I think the consumers are driving this a heck of a lot more. So I think that also should give us a lot more of confidence to see that this will happen in the near future.
Thank you. And Priyanka, I know Hempel has been launching the Future Proof as one of the initiatives to look into how to make the operation much more effective and efficient so that they can reduce footprint. Can you share a little bit about what is your take on driving carbon reduction by looking at making your operation more efficient?
Okay, there you go. Thank you. Yes, I can share a little bit. So just to start off, we recently launched our first ever sustainability strategy in Hempel this year. So that has been super exciting. And that's Future Proof, as you mentioned. And Future Proof is a holistic sustainability strategy. So it really moves throughout our entire value chain. But focusing on operations specifically, we have set a target to become carbon neutral by 2025 in our own operations. So that's quite ambitious, we believe. We've also signed up to the Science Based Targets Initiative, which I believe is the most, or one of the most well-esteemed initiatives in this aspect. We've chosen the 1.5 degree pathway, which is, again, the most ambitious one. That means that our CO2 emissions would be in line with, greenhouse gas emissions would be in line with the 1.5 degree increase pre-industrial levels. So what are we doing actually to achieve this? Well, we have key activities that we are looking into right now. And again, it's new for us, so we're on a journey. But a big important project for us right now is to look into how we can source renewable energy here in South and East Asia. And that's quite different in the different countries we're in, and the challenges are also different in this regard. So in Malaysia, we have our biggest factory, and that's, of course, a key factory for us to transition. And same goes with India and Vietnam and Indonesia. But we're looking into different models really, and we're really trying to get that full 360 view of how we can actually do that. So we're looking into everything from sourcing directly from the grid, which is of course not fully renewable yet in any of those countries. We're also looking into on-site installation of either solar plants or even smaller windmills that we could install in our factories. We're also looking into partners specifically. What are the key players around us in the areas where we operate, and how can we work together? Perhaps we have some similar ambitions in this aspect, and we can source together. So that's one of the key activities we're doing. But challenges in different countries in this regard. It's difficult to get verified or credible certifications that the sourcing will actually be renewable. There are different certifications in place, but we're not sure if, or we need to do a very thorough check if these certifications can actually ensure that the sourcing is going directly into our plants and not somewhere else. So those are some of the challenges we're working with. Other than renewable energy, that's a big topic of its own. We're also looking into electrifying our car fleet, our company car fleet. So we're moving towards electric and hybrid vehicles. Soon, hopefully, our VP of South and East Asia, sitting down there, Jonathan Mercer, he will be driving an electric vehicle, so that's very exciting. So again, these are also some, it poses some challenges for us because the green company car way of working is challenged in the sense, what comes first? It's kind of the hen and the egg problem of infrastructure versus do we get the cars first and then build the infrastructure? So it's a little bit back and forth there. But again, in many of the countries we're in, we're seeing that a lot of charging plans or infrastructure development plans are happening. So that's very exciting. So those are two of the key things we're doing here.
Thank you, Priyanka. And I can see Corina, you.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in because I feel like we're so closely matched on our journey. IKEA globally began tracking its carbon footprint in 2016. At least that's our baseline globally. And back then it was 24 million tons CO2 equivalent was the baseline. And 13% of that was made up by food ingredients, retail operations, and last mile delivery. So today, that is actually our biggest focus for the retailers, is to work on electrifying our last mile, 100% renewable energy, and also working with our food ingredients. And by 2025, we will have a 50% plant-based offer on our main meals at our IKEA restaurants here in Southeast Asia. That's a global goal. But we don't, because of supply chain challenges, we don't actually always get the global range of IKEA food in as quickly as we would like in our markets. So our guys from IKEA Food have been out there sourcing locally, different locally relevant offers. In Mexico, we've got like a vegetarian wrap. In Malaysia, we've got a vegetarian burger, like a plant-based burger, pretend meat burger. And I'm trying to remember what it is in Singapore now. Oh, it's a schnitzel. We have a plant-based schnitzel. So our guys are getting really proactive. And back to the point about how excited everybody is. It is so much fun for me to see how engaged our coworkers are getting in this topic. Totally different than it was 1 year ago. Now everybody wants to get involved. Everybody wants to be part of the sustainability strategy. And everybody's putting up their hand to say, how can I help? And so, yeah, the IKEA food guys in our stores are really doing a lot. And back to the technology that was mentioned, we are using a winnow system. We weigh every morsel of food that gets thrown out in an IKEA restaurant gets weighed first. And it tells the coworker who's throwing it out the value of that food, what they could have bought with that food, what is the equivalent value of that food. So it creates hyper awareness about food waste. And just through that awareness, we cut from our 2018 baseline, we cut our food waste by 50% in our operations in Southeast Asia. So, and we're continuing with that system now. The next target is to reach 60% by 2025 from the 2018 baseline.
Wow, and I'm looking at Ambassador Antti. Maybe the meat-free Mondays. I suggest that you go to IKEA and you have a plant bowl, not a meat bowl. Schnitzel you can do as well. Yeah, no, thanks for the sharing. Let's keep on this the value of what this decarbonization and reducing footprint actually mean. And I would like to go back to Stephen, as you mentioned that you have made a commitment to carbon neutralize your value chain. What do you see will be the role of advocacy as you are part of the public affairs, and how important it will be?
Sure. I mean, look, one of the things that's very clear in driving the message about reducing your carbon footprint is what actions are you taking as an individual company. And you can do that internally, you can do that in-house. There are generally very few restrictions to how ambitious you can be. But when you try to bring that out into the open and you want to change customer mindsets, and Corina touched on what IKEA is doing with their food systems. Having previously worked in the food industry, I know that getting people to move from what they're really used to going into a new product. So let's say a beverage that contains less sugar. From my previous experience, I know that a lot of companies have been doing what we call reformulation by stealth, because consumers are such that if you tell them, did you really enjoy that drink? Oh, yeah, I did. It contains 10% less sugar than previously. Yeah, it didn't taste the same, did it? That's the mentality. So I think the role of advocacy is really, how do we convince some of these governments, especially in this part of the world, in the Asian region, that reducing your carbon footprint, achieving carbon neutrality requires throwing everything on the table. You can't just go with one technology. And sadly, what we are seeing in the region currently is, I'll just talk about the transport sector. Everyone seems to be hedging their bets on electric vehicles, and that's great. I think electric vehicles have a very significant role to play. But what about heavy transport? What about construction? What about your public bus fleets? And when I talk to a lot of governments, what they tell me is, oh yeah, we're going to decarbonize. We're going to have fully electric buses by 2040, or we're going to have fully electric, or we're going to do away with the internal combustion engine by 2050. That's 19 years away, right? Or that's 50 years away, depending on what you look at. So what are we going to do in the interim? You saw the UN or the World Meteorological Organization's report that despite, and we all think that carbon emissions have actually come down because people are not traveling as much or not getting out on the road as much, not flying as much. But the reality, according to the report, is it's actually gone up. So I think all solutions are on the table. And I think in terms of advocacy, that's the message that I would push. You can't go with one technology. You've got to look at all solutions. And, I think, but again, going back to what IKEA is doing is great, because methane is probably the highest emitter in the world. So if you look at the agriculture industry, the most amount of emissions come from the agricultural sector. And that's a tough one to reduce.
I think the appeal to duty, though, and your responsibility to the environment doesn't work for everybody. That's why I think we see it as really important to just make it desirable, not to guilt people into it, not to talk too much about, you must, but to just make it delicious. Or, the vegetable ball, the plant ball. The plant ball's 4% of the climate footprint of a regular meatball. But right now, I will say our sales for our meatballs continue. We sold 9 million last year in Singapore or something. I mean, our meatballs and our plant balls are about 6% of sales. So we have a long journey to go to make it desirable and to make the customer just want it, not because they have to have it, because it's good for them, but because they want it.
Thank you. And staying with that delicious thought about things we desire, Vijay and Priyanka, you both mentioned infrastructure. How to make that infrastructure and the technology behind it delicious? What do you see happening, Vijay?
Making technology and infrastructure delicious. Now that's going to be difficult. But 7 out of the 10 transactions that we've advised on this year has been on infrastructure. And I think that the world is waking up. And maybe you're right, Stephen, we need to do more, right? 19 years is a long way away, but a lot of the policymakers that we consult to, sometimes we tell them that think of this as Industrial Revolution 2.0. You know, you do need to invest in this. You do need to start somewhere, even if it does take 5 years. It's fine, but don't wait 5 years to start. Start now, because infrastructure is a long game. And one of the key things that we're seeing has helped in this region, but we do need a lot more of it, Corrado, is more public-private partnership on these infrastructures, development and all that, and also the repurposing of some of these infrastructures. You know, all oil pipelines and all gas pipelines that were going in one way could now go the other way. We could harness that to use CO2 transportation, hydrogen transportation, etc. But it will still need some repurposing, you know, and so this is where I think some of the more blended financing instruments and so on will come into play. But at the end of the day, it's really good to see the end users being, you know, make this more desired, right? So, and I think that's where the big push is going to come from consumers in the industrial space. If you are requesting that this is the kind of energy that you wish to have, then that's going to give the impetus that further accelerates adoption of these programs. So that's very important.
Yeah, from an industrial player, how do you look at? I mean, you mentioned the challenges around, you know, the grids, how to verify it, and how to trust. How will that technology and the infrastructure, do you think, play a role into providing you that comfort? Is Hempel willing to partner up in a project? Do we see that happening to a larger extent?
Yeah, so I mean, making infrastructure more desirable, that's a tough question for me to answer. But I mean, partnerships are a key part of Future Proof as well. So we definitely need partnerships across our value chain. So that extends to suppliers, but it also extends to our customers, especially, and industry partners, perhaps even competitors to a certain extent, if it's needed, right? So like I was touching on before, in some of the areas we're in, we're actually looking into partnering with people to source renewable energy together. As an example, in India, we have a factory that has a smaller energy consumption, so we're not able to source renewable from the grid. That's our problem. We're not spending enough, using enough. So that way, if we can pool together with other ambitious companies, perhaps we can be allowed to. It's really about being allowed to. But so partnerships are key, I think, in all areas of sustainability. Really, we cannot do this alone. That also expands to circular economy thinking and so on.
I agree, and I think, you know, the whole partnership is what enables the circular economy, and I think that's exactly what people need to say. How do we collaborate on this? How do we partner on this? And that's going to make a big, you know, that's going to be transformational in terms of the adoption of it. And then just last point on infrastructure is one thing that often gets overlooked is storage. And I think that's something that, you know, as you journey on towards, you know, decarbonizing and from your own perspective, think about the storage aspect of it as well. That's very, very important, and I think that will allow you to use it even more.
Yeah, thank you. Staying on the partnership and going over to you, Enric, the importance of being able to measure the success of a partnership, and in that sense, how do you create that awareness? Can you share a little bit the work that you have done in that sense? Because I think it's really appealing that you have technology as an enabler, but you're also being able to create a measurement that you can play back to engage.
Yes, so and it comes back to the initial point that we were touching on awareness, right? If we can make you aware of what you're doing, and you gave an example very similar to what we use at Corina. We may present a banking customer not only the amount of footprint or kilograms of carbon footprint that they've generated, but we also tell them 40 trees for the next 12 months will be needed to kind of offset your footprint. It's very impactful if my bank tells me that. It's actually teaching me a very big lesson. I mean, 40 trees is a lot, 12 months, right? So by knowing that my petrol consumption is being generating that much carbon footprint, and by knowing that I am actually going to need 40 trees for 12 months, I may start going with public transport, or I may start using some type of clean energy vehicle, right? So anything that we do is based on those pillars, right? Making customers aware, teaching them on what they could do, because once you know what is happening, you want to know what could you do to reduce your footprint. And I think you gave somebody today gave an example. It may not be the same to buy a packaged food from a big supermarket versus a local shop where they actually producing or selling locally produced ingredients, right? So once I know what can I do, I actually take actions, and this is where we see a lot of progress. And going back to the point that you guys mentioned, there is so much a government can do. There is so much a company can do, or a bank, for instance. We work with banks, but it's much more powerful if I am a bank and I can enable 10 million customers to be cleaner or to be greener in a way. It's much more powerful than me as a bank doing anything, because I have 10 million people literally working for us as greener consumers, right? So it's a lot around that, and very exciting, because the last point I will make is maybe all the generations were not that keen on these things, but I tell you what, we work with a lot of banks that work with very young generations, and they actually want to bank with entities that care about being green. And they will be moving bank accounts or moving anything from a traditional bank to a digital bank that is using such a technology like the one we provide or Menica provides to help me understanding my carbon footprint. So actions are happening, and people are definitely pushing for it.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions coming in, so I will also make room for those. But staying a little bit on this new generation and what people are actually asking for, Corina, if we are thinking about the next consumer of IKEA and the way they will be the way they like to be engaged, what do you see?
We talk about creating here in Southeast Asia, our stores are all anchored at shopping centers that we also own. Not all of them, not here in Singapore, but in Malaysia in particular, we have 5 shopping centers. And we talk about moving away from pure selling to creating a lifestyle hub, an education center, an activity, a meeting place for the many people. I think young people are going to be shopping online more and more in the future. So bringing them together in places where they meet, talk, collaborate, giving them spaces for that. IKEA is focused on building a younger generation of customer. We've now got a gaming line in our store for the first time, a gaming chair and all the things that you need to do gaming. So trying to appeal to young people. And then I think it is to use our platform. I'm actually representing IKEA in 5 markets today: Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. Soon, coming next month, the largest IKEA store in the world in Philippines. And in the future, we'll be in Vietnam. Did I mention that already? Mexico is the other market that we're in. As a franchisee, those are the markets where I'm representing. And by 2030, that's 480 million people in those markets. So I take your point, what we do as a business, we must take responsibility for our own renewable energy and so on. But if we can motivate the millions and millions of people in our markets, and many of those are, of course, developing economies where sustainable products and services are the hardest to afford, and people have the thinnest wallets. So that's where I think IKEA can really make the difference by making sustainable products affordable to the many people. Talking about, reusable water bottles instead of plastic, all of that, having that as a message and engaging young people in that. But I think we need consumer demand as well. When the consumers ask for these things, we will all start producing these things, right? And it is interesting to see, I had one phone call recently from a customer that asked about the carbon footprint for a specific product, and that had never happened before. So we are starting to get those questions in. There's definitely a rising level of consumer interest in understanding the footprint that they create when they buy our products.
Yeah. Corina, if you can stay with me because I have a question directly to you from Mohammed. So thank you for the question. How do you manage to bring the sustainability culture and change spirit from the successful Nordics, especially with IKEA, to your Asian and Southeast Asian team?
It's been a journey. It's been a journey for us for sure. One thing we've done recently is we have removed it as a function, as a standalone function. There was a lot of sort of finger pointing, like that's your job, that's your job. So we eliminated the function. I'm more of a coordinator, and the responsibilities sit within collaboration networks, we call them. So the transport guys are taking care of electrifying the last mile, and the food guys, like I was explaining, are really taking hold of the food agenda, and nobody is looking to someone else. We have incorporated it into competence profiles, like your job description. It's part of your business plan. It's part of your reward. So it's just integrated into every part of our company now. And then we talk about it at, people and planet positive is one of our values. And it's the day you get onboarded, you learn about the IKEA way of doing things. And that comes a lot from our Swedish culture. And, Ingvar Kamprad, it's just built into our DNA to make more with less and to not waste anything. That's what you learn on day one, indoctrination party.
Yeah. So going a little bit back to how we structured this fireside chat. So we are looking at decarbonization and how to reduce the footprint. We looked at from the streams of value chain, operational efficiency, engaging technology, innovation, waste. I got a very interesting questions to all of you, and the reason why I'm making it the streams clear again is the question is, what is the key action to give the most effective CO2 reduction within the next 10-15 years in your industry? Stephen.
Well, the key action to reduce carbon emissions in the next 10 years. I think I represent a company that, as Ambassador Ante first explained, was a traditional oil and gas company. So 48 years ago, it was the Finnish national oil company. And in the last 15 to 20 years, it has transformed itself to be the world's leading renewable player, or the producer of renewable fuels. And we just only see continued growth in that area. But I think it goes back to my initial point that, yes, obviously we want to see more renewable fuels in the marketplace. To the ambassador from Sweden, you were talking about going into an electric car. Have you thought about renewable diesel? Right? 100% HVO will work in your current diesel car, and it means that you don't have a stranded asset, a car that is thrown away. So that's something to consider. And I think it goes back to, again, what I said. I think we need multiple technologies. We need electric cars. We need sustainable aviation fuel that we can fly safely. Currently you can use a 50% blend of sustainable aviation fuel. And what we're seeing, going back to what you said, Vijay, about customers and consumers, you're right, that demand is now being driven by customers. So we, as Neste, have signed partnerships with companies like the Boston Consulting Group, Travel Action, who are saying we want our people to fly on airlines that are using sustainable aviation fuel. And obviously they're doing it for a benefit, right? So they offset their carbon emissions. So nothing comes free. There's always a rationale behind this, but that's probably a start. And I think going back to it, use all technologies, use all options, put everything on the table, and that's the way we're going to achieve carbon emission reduction targets.
Vijay, what's your take?
I don't think there's a silver bullet. If that's what I agree with Stephen that I think it's going to be a combination of things that we need to address, right? And young people. I have two teenage children who remind me constantly of what we need to do better. And I think so. There's a lot of hope that we have. I think going forward. For me, I would say technology, huge enabler. I think the other aspect that we cannot ignore is the whole circular economy, and a key component in that is waste to energy. And I think that in this part of the world, that is, we still have landfills that can be removed, and there's a lot that we can be doing. And yet, electrification rates in Southeast Asia are not where they should be. So we have quite a lot of work cut out for us in this space.
Yeah, on that note, do you see a role for government to intervene more? So one of the questions here is, will carbon taxes, for example, incentivize more a circular economy?
Great question. And I think carbon taxes, or whether you have a cap and trade or you have any kind of like exchange programs, definitely will provide a commercial incentive. So I think Singapore has recently increased its carbon pricing. Fantastic. It's the rest of the region is thinking about it. But so yes, policymakers do need to kind of encourage carbon, some form of carbon pricing in local markets. The challenge is going to be how you audit it, etc., etc. But that's something that we can deal with. But we forecast carbon at $100, not too far away. So it's definitely going to be a real commercial incentive to start doing this.
I just wanted to touch on the incentive for companies to pursue these initiatives. There is something very interesting we've actually realized with our customers is that the people that are conscious aware or that cares about how green we are or how sustainable we are, they also have a very interesting point of view. They are prepared to pay a bit more of the products than other people are. And this is key, especially in banking, right? Everybody wants to have good customers that are willing to spend more, right? This is key to identify. If you are a bank and you identify these people, green people, actually is even beneficial for you because you can actually get more money out of that, if that makes sense. Because they are prepared to buy greener products. So it's very interesting. A lot of people think about sustainability as a cost, purely as this is expense, this is a big budget for next year. Absolutely not. There is multiple ways for, especially in banking, for companies to kind of recover that investment and make a good profit out of it as well. So it's not only a cost, it's actually a very big opportunity for in many industries, at least in banking.
Corina?
And I just think in retail, in our markets, it's the hierarchy of needs, isn't it? So we are working really hard to make sure that the affordable product is never more expensive. The sustainable product is never more expensive than the sustainable alternative. No, we want our sustainable products to be affordable for the many people. That's the key. It is keeping the costs low. And I mean, of course, at IKEA, that's always been part of the philosophy. The price is built into the product from the very beginning and all of that. But we don't want it to be a luxury for the few. We want it to be available to the many. And that's why I think sustainability really starts at home. The journey really starts with what you're doing in your own house. And that's where I think we have our power as a retailer. IKEA is keeping it affordable, making it desirable for the millions out there, not the few.
Enrique, you made me think a little bit, and it's a provocation and an open question. Again, I don't have the answer. But as sustainability, as this decarbonization, as this reducing our footprint seems to have so many benefit and incentive, a new business model being created, why didn't we do it before? What is changing now? Why are we putting so much effort on it now? Is it because someone is telling us that we need to do it?
Well, I think there's a combination of things. Now there is, for instance, technology. We keep talking about technology, and technology is here actually, and it's been proven for the last. So we can use it to, for instance, estimate a very good. But I think there is also, a social factor. People are starting to realize that this is just not the way to move forward. I mean, if we continue like that, whoever is coming next is just going to be in a very, very poor situation, right, with this planet, right? So I think it's a combination, and now there is a lot of incentives, I guess, to do it.
Yeah, I think another factor is the fact that look at COVID, look at the trillions of dollars that have been spent in stimulus packages, in technology, in research to come up with a solution. And that solution came about because for most of us around the world, COVID is an existential threat, right? We see people dying, literally. With climate change, it's still there in the distance. It's something that is still a little bit far away. And we read these great reports like the IPCC report, the WMO report, the UN Environment Report. I think there's a report that comes out every day. But what are we doing about it now? Right? We need to act now. And that's really what is critical.
I think the will really has changed, though. The reaction to that IPCC report was different than in the years past. And I think that comes from the experience of the weather that we have had in the last year. The number in my home province in British Columbia in Canada, 700 people died of heat-related death when a heat dome came and covered that part of North America. So the number of floods and massive weather systems that we've seen, the violent weather conditions, I think have really woken people up because it's just been such a fast succession of terrible events. I feel like our kids are more aware and keeping us more to account.
If I can just add, I think, very similar to what everyone has said, but for Hempel, it's been the full picture of stakeholders, really, we're sensing it from. It's from our own employees that want us to do better, and it's from our customers as well. It's from our suppliers that are that we're talking to, and we're of course also a supplier to companies, right? So we're being asked these questions as well. So it goes back and forth. I think it's important to say that there's no. We've been doing things. We have been doing sustainable practices for many years in certain areas, but we haven't framed it like that, and we haven't had a full and what do you say? We haven't had a framework for it to do it in a structured way, right? So that's what we're doing now, and that's what we're sensing we need to do now. So again, back to the value chain point, that's really where you need to have it throughout the value chain. And for our customers, we're also sensing at a product level, they're asking for it now. I believe that was mentioned earlier as well, but that's something we're looking into also with having a scorecard for our products and saying, this particular product, if you as a customer compare it to another alternative, what is important to you of sustainability criteria? Is it circularity? Well, then the performance and the footprint of this product will be this versus the other product. So those are types of solutions we're looking into now, where it can be very a conscious decision for the customer what they're deciding to purchase from us, or what matters for them in terms of sustainability.
I think it's the trifecta, politics, economics, and consumers. So I think in the Eurozone, and maybe the Nordic countries can take some credit for this, started a whole cap and trade program years ago, perhaps ahead of time, right? 15 years ago. and the Biden administration is now fully supporting it. So the politics is actually in the policies that are coming into that. The other one is the economics as a result of all of this, right? Has allowed companies now to go ahead and do that. Before 2016, you may not have had budget to do a carbon pricing or carbon footprint scorecard, right? And then lastly, it's our consumers, like what you touched on. So it's a trifecta, which is why I think there's a lot of hope that this is actually not going to be a fad. Like what you said, Corrado, the why is no longer there to be answered.
Yeah, and on the how then, how does it feel working with those initiatives? If you should share some of your key takeaways with us today about you, how you feel working with those initiatives, what would be the message that you will like to leave once we are wrapping up in 10 minutes time? Enrique, go ahead.
Well, I'll insist is all in our hands. I mean, we can, be very clear with, from governments, from companies, and try to do our best. But as consumers, we need to demand, a greener planet. And in my industry, banking, how I do it is I am going to demand to my bank that is actually has to provide me with such information because I want to know how green I'm being or how. So I will do that. So it's in my hands. Yes, I have to ask for help to my governments or my banks or my companies, but it's in everybody's hands to push for this. I think it is now we have the technology and the interest to do it. So that's my takeaway.
Priyanka,
Yeah, sorry, what was the question?
your takeaway, if you should leave one key takeaway to the audience about working with reducing the footprint for Hempel and working with decarbonization altogether, what would it be?
I think it's really collaboration. It's partners. We need to work together to solve or to decarbonize. With everyone that's interested in that, we can find many creative ways of doing that across differences, even in our companies and with the government and with all the other stakeholders I've already mentioned a few times. So partnerships are key, and we're definitely very open to that in Hempel.
Guess I'm next. Takeaway, I guess, is just to be persistent with the policies that you have in place and to keep going. This is about not just Singapore, right? Southeast Asia and so on. So I think each country is going at its own pace, and so we just have to be patient yet persistent as we approach decarbonization.
First, maybe personally, to say that I said to my teenager a little while back, a couple of years back, after reading an article, I said, "Oh, thank God, you Gen Z, you guys are so smart. You're going to save us. You're going to save the world, the Gen Z." And she said, Mom, I don't appreciate that. What are you going to do? You put us into this mess. You're stressing me out when you say that I have to save the world. So I think for our generation to step up, our generation, can I say that at this? I don't know. It's not up to the young people. We shan't leave a mess behind us. We should take our responsibility and take leadership on these issues as the adults in the room, not rely entirely on Greta to lead the way on this topic. And I definitely agree with her that, the house is on fire and we need to behave that way. And we're working on that in our company. And I must say, I feel purpose-driven to be in the role that I'm in. And I think everybody wants to get up and feel like their job has meaning at the end of the day. And I just can't think of a more important role to play than to try to motivate people to operate in a more sustainable way at a business level. And I guess my takeaway would also be echoing what I said before, not to forget the customers. It's not just about the solar panels and the electric vehicles, but it's about what we can do to influence all the people within our reach, our suppliers, our customers, our co-workers, our partners, and our governments.
for me, it's sort of a personal opportunity, right? It's very rare where you get an opportunity to work with an organization that has a purpose that matches your own passion and your beliefs and your purpose. And as a father to 3 girls, my purpose is to leave a better planet for my kids. And when I read some of this data, I need to know, what am I doing about it now? What am I doing as an individual in my home, in my environment, with my friends? But what am I doing in my job, in the role that I do to change what's currently taking place? So that's what really drives me. I see a tremendous opportunity. I think that reading all the reports, it's not all gloom and doom. What they all say is that we still have a chance to change things. But to change things, every single one of us has to take action.
Yeah. And actually, again, I would like to conclude by sharing the same feeling I had after the first panel discussion. This feeling of not going to the gym anymore because you have all the headline, the negative news. Actually, when you start talking about it and sharing insights and sharing experiences, there is so much that is happening that is actually driven by new business model, new type of engagement, technology. And I think what I'm really thankful for your sharing is that those insights and the inputs that you have provided and your takeaways are actually also going in that direction. This is difficult, is complex, but there are plenty of opportunities out there. So, Corina, Ikea, thank you so much. Priyanka, Hempel, thank you. Enrique, Maliga, thank you. Vijay, Ristat Energy, thank you. Stephen, Neste, thank you. I'm handing back to Eric for your concluding remarks. Thank you all.
Thank you, Corrado, and our speakers for such an educational and thought-provoking fireside chat. I believe that in both of the discussions here today, we have shown how the Nordic region is actively working towards lowering its carbon footprint by 2030. Through strong co-collaborations and co-innovations, we can utilize already existing technologies and solutions to address these challenges together. So this marks the end of this year's edition of the Nordic Green, a recurring event organized in conjunction with the Singapore International Energy Week. We look forward to continuing to organize this event, hopefully in an even more physical manner next year, also as a supporting partner to the Energy Market Authority and the Sustainable Energy Association in Singapore. So lastly, thank you to our moderators, speakers, guests, and virtual attendees for joining us for this event. We hope to see you again for next year's Nordic Green. Have a good day.